Hello, and thank you for taking the time to watch our webinar. My name is Matt Tyler with Aberdeen, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our on-demand webinar session, The Key to Talent Management. This webinar was produced by Aberdeen and is brought to you by Cegid. Over the next 50 minutes, we'll be hearing from Zach Chertok, Research Analyst of the HCM practice at Aberdeen, and Pierre Roy, Sales Engineer at Cegid. They'll be discussing some of the core HR challenges facing European Union and Canadian businesses. They'll break down the 5 core competencies of HR in those markets, and they'll take a look at some of the types of technologies that the best-in-class are leveraging to find, keep, and develop top talent. This session is pre-recorded, but if you have any questions during the webinar, you can reach out for more information. Contact information will be provided at the conclusion of the webinar. It is now my pleasure to turn the webinar over to Zach Chertok.
Thank you, Bennett, and welcome everyone to today's webinar. In my line of work, I not only look at management practices and methodologies, productivity and performance at other organizations, I manage it for my own business as well. Across the field of organizations that I analyze, one of the most pressing challenges facing recruiters, managers, staffers, and HR is that expectations for top talent as defined by the organization just aren't being met using the current set of solutions that the average company offers to these stakeholders. For many of these companies, talent acquisition is an acute focus when management talks about getting the right talent to the right place at the right time. For many managers, though, myself included, when we stop to look at our goals, it turns out that they're in fact much longer term than just hiring. These goals go beyond focusing on just bringing in top talent to redevelop how employees are profiled in terms of performance to, acquire new talent from outside, but also promote existing talent from within. Converting this into the language of a manager, talent acquisition is really about talent placement, which is really about achieving management goals while extending the maximum possible lifespan of employee engagement with the company. As we go through today's presentation, I'll take you through the findings from a survey that Aberdeen ran on behalf of Cegid to understand what talent placement looks like for companies based in the European Union and Canada. Across both regions, companies are looking to improve talent quality and engagement to improve overall business performance and productivity. The top performing strategy that these organizations are trending towards is to integrate talent acquisition metrics and performance management goals by bringing together data sets from both processes into one platform for unified analysis. When I talk about quality, the average company today looks at a host of metrics that define their success. Something that's vitally clear from the data, which is that data and platform unification for labor management is a best-in-class strategy. What this means is that the top 20% of performers within the data set are choosing this path. These companies are defined by the fact that they're 21% more likely than all others to find that their average employee tenure increased in the last 12 months. 2, that they're 83% more likely to find that their overall performance, both financially and operationally, improved. 3, they're 26% more likely to find that their internal HR practices are the best in their respective industries per employee satisfaction. And 4, they're 64% more likely than all others to find that they're able to more effectively fill open positions. Before I go a bit further, Pierre, I just want to ask you from the technology picture, what you guys are seeing on the practitioner side at Cegid with respect to these statistics.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Zach, and thanks everyone for listening to this presentation. So there are many ways from a technology perspective that people are using technology to improve on all of those points. Leveraging technology to better understand the current status of their workforce. Top performing companies are better able to respond to the career development goals of their employees by offering the right training and carving out the next steps in their career. So really looking at what it is that they're doing now, what it is that they want to do, and what they have potential for, and really finding the right training for that. Because employees have the right training and coaching for their current and future positions, they are better performers now and are able to jump into their next role once it becomes vacant. That next role, the role that suddenly becomes vacant can be a huge pressure on managers, on business processes, on the recruitment team. Recruiters are spending a lot of time looking for people to fill roles that could be filled internally with the right succession planning behind it. And employees that are happy or even grateful to have worked with you are more likely to engage more when they're employed with you. And if they do end up leaving over time, they will say great things about you, about your organization, about their colleagues, about the professional advancement that they were able to make with your company when they go somewhere else. And they speak to their colleagues who are other professionals who might be interested in working for you in the future. Ultimately, this is all about investing in your most important resource, the people that work with you, to drive their performance with insight. You'll notice that a lot of the practical things that we'll be talking about are really just processes that most companies out there are already doing. The key for the top performing companies is they're using smart processes to get a little bit more out of their performance reviews, to get a little bit more out of their training and programs and succession planning, and the other processes that they're doing all the time in their companies.
Thanks, Pierre. And that's actually really, really great connection between both the managers and the employees, where some of these statistics look at the management level. As we start to feed into the next step, which is the agenda for today's presentation, that really kind of brings those early statistics home. So the metrics that I showcased in the Pierre and I just talked about are really meant to be a primer as we go into the broader findings to follow. But before I go a little bit further, I just want to provide some insight as to how the core of today's talk is going to be structured. At the first, we're going to take you through how Aberdeen arrives at its best-in-class designation, just to give some context as to what these data points actually mean in the context of the data set. From there, we're going to go through the major challenges in talent placement for European Union and Canadian firms, as shown and reflected from the survey that we put out in the market. In looking at the pressures, we really want to provide the data wisdom to help you understand how the broader market views these challenges as shaping the dialogue for the solutions that the best-in-class are choosing to use. From there, there's some really great news that we're going to offer a way to fix a lot of those pressures by showing how the best-in-class develop talent placement strategies centered on 5 core competencies that work together in a seamless way. And then before sort of wrapping up the data side, instead of just simply stating the solution, we're going to talk about sort of a summary of what those strategies are that the best-in-class are using in both markets, but also the business metrics that they're achieving for their organizations. And then towards the end of the presentation, I'm going to hand things over to Pierre for sort of a more formal introduction about how Sagid really supports the data we're talking about today in the field. So to kick things off, we're going to dive right into Aberdeen's research methodology. Aberdeen surveys a market of management practitioners across 16 different technology areas to understand trends in pressures, which are the challenges that cause organizations to think or manage differently, actions, which are the strategies that are designed and implemented to respond to those pressures, capabilities, which are internal and external response mechanisms that help to carry out those strategies, and then enablers, which are the ultimate technologies that support the capabilities to carry out the actions in response to the pressures. In HCM, Aberdeen surveys go out to practitioners to understand the strategies they're using inside their organizations to drive real improvements in key performance metrics, such as revenue growth and performance optimization. And while all of this has really been at an academic level, Pierre, I'm just interested to know if you have any insight from the application side and the industry practitioner side to speak a little bit more about some context around industry pressures in the talent world.
So one of the pressures that companies in every field are facing right now is an incredibly low unemployment rate. It's a battle for talent out there, and it's making it really challenging for companies to attract, recruit, and retain talented employees. Acquiring and making use of their best-in-class talent management tools is empowering top-performing companies to improve their internal processes, such as engaging with their talent through continuous improvement, and in improving their employment brand to enhance retention and recruitment successes. We'll be talking about modern performance initiatives coming up. To this, we can add development and efforts that respond to the current and future goals of employees, tools that allow driven employees to identify and just enable their own development, both for their current roles and for future roles. Top-performing companies do this by clearly defining the roles in their organizations, identifying the core competencies needed in those roles, tying training to those competencies, and giving employees and managers the information about how their skill sets and the skill sets of their teams align or don't with the roles that their team members are in.
Thanks for that, Pierre. That provided some great context for today's conversation and talk track. And to bring it home at the statistical level, once those of us at Aberdeen conduct surveys, we reach the conclusions about precisely what Pierre was speaking to by tabulating the data and assigning weights to the KPIs that we asked about to determine who the top 20% of respondents are in terms of KPI performance. When we report our data, we compare the best in class to all other companies, where all other companies are made up of the industry average and laggards, which are shown here. And I just want to give you a chance, Pierre, to talk a little bit more from the industry side respect to this data breakdown.
So one of the things that I noted basically in this slide is that those 3 KPIs that you're mentioning in the slide are organizational goals, employee performance, and bench strength can often be really hard to communicate and difficult to measure. You know that managers and employees, they don't really look forward to the performance assessment periods. They can be long and they can be adversarial sometimes, and people don't really see the value in them, but really the performance review is a central part of the way that best-in-class companies are reaching the top. And they're the central way in which we get to measure those three measures: organizational goals, employee performance, and bench strength. And we'll see a little bit later on the way in which the top performing companies have broken down and broken out of the yearly model and gone towards subjective or continuous improvement and tied all of that to their succession planning.
Thanks again for that, for the industry insight here, because one of the things that we're going to see today is that while we're crossing a lot of geographies and we're going across a lot of industries, it turns out that the pressures and the strategic motivators for going to the kind of solution that we're going to describe really aren't that different across those boundaries. So to illustrate at a high level, the survey that we conducted in these two markets, again, comes from focusing on the EU and Canada to understand what you were talking about, Pierre, earlier in terms of trends in talent placement, from pressures to response strategies and addressing those pressures. But again, relative to the counts that we pulled back, we were able to really dichotomize both markets to really understand the strategic challenges, both at levels of company size, company revenue strength, as well as how different industries are performing apart from one another. So that sets us up really well from the data methodology to get us into the context of today's subjects. And I want to continue a little bit more now into the core challenges in talent placement, both in the EU and Canada. When people imagine what talent placement is, more often than not, by a ratio of almost 2 to 1, HR and managers think about talent acquisition. The problem is that overwhelmingly management at the top of organizations admit that they just aren't getting the top quality talent in the context of how they defined it. In the EU, a key problem behind this is that 37% of organizations lack the necessary data visibility to understand just how incoming talent matches or misses the roles they advertise. A combination of narrowing skills requirements and an overwhelming focus on talent acquisition is really handicapping these companies from having full insight about the workforce that they need versus the one they get. Pierre, you spoke to this in the pressure section when you talked about really building that job profile and talent profile both inside and outside of the organization, and that lacking one or both of those means that as recruiters, hiring managers, HR personnel, or managers, we're really missing out on understanding the true definition, the true defining factors of top talent matches for our emerging roles. And right now I'm going to segue here to sort of a day in the life moment to try and bring this home. Let's think about the average recruiter's workday. At the top of the task list is to develop a pipeline of qualified, vetted candidates for roles as they're requisitioned. One day your manager comes to your desk and pulls you into a performance meeting where she explains that the candidates you've been passing through to have interviews with the hiring managers haven't been making it through the interviews. In fact, it's become such a problem that hiring managers rarely reach out to the candidates that you pass to them. With your job in question, you quickly try to justify your conclusions based on the data you had to work with, but when you take a second look at the first few data profiles for candidates, you quickly see what's missing. To make matters worse, where the data was missing, you realize that you made assumptions based on your own biases that hadn't given managers the talent they really needed. This is the example that these 37% of companies are facing. When there are holes in the data, it's very difficult to measure and track individual employee or candidate performance, and the talent profiles we rely on suddenly are unreliable. Internally, we design processes for talent placement around these profiles, so this is a really big problem. And getting back to the manager in trouble for bad candidate positioning, the candidates he passed to the hiring managers weren't properly vetted, which meant that he was risking that their tenure would be short, they'd be disengaged, and their overall performance would be average or poor. It's a good thing that the HR manager spotted the issue. As the recruiter, my HR manager is so upset that she transferred me to Canada where she felt that my approach might work since it wasn't working in the France office. I took her advice to heart, however, and took the time to analyze whether the new office was any better or worse than what I experienced in the EU. It turns out that my firm is one of 36% in the Canadian market that lack data visibility across talent metrics because of holes in the solution ecosystem. Before I was able to even get started, I know that I'm going to face similar internal quality challenges that I faced in France and the EU. My only problem is that unlike in the France office, I need to get better faster and solve these data problems because I'm up against U.S. firms for the same talent. My Canadian applicant pools know no borders. To get smart, I went to a conference and touched base with my U.S. counterparts and discovered that they're focused on candidate profiling that matches their existing internal best practices relative to a position of the skills and persona of the candidates that they're vetting. It seems like a great idea that I want to champion in Canada and to go from being a bad EU recruiter to reshaping the Canadian frontier. In Canada, the challenge is now to resolve recruiting challenges by closing data gaps and focusing on how each candidate matches the needs of the role to better compete both in Canada and cross-border for the talent that I need. What I missed in the EU is that I fell for the corporate hierarchy when my colleagues weren't even paying attention to where incoming candidates would fit in. I was also making assumptions about what made candidates good for a role because they had the broadest set of skills with respect to what I was told to seek as compared to other candidates. What I didn't see was that the candidates weren't necessarily good based on the forward-looking top performance profile that the hiring manager needed to meet or exceed. The candidate was only good for the job and not good for tenure at the company. Holes in the data set mean that recruiters, hiring managers, and HR do one of two things. Either they take risks on a good feeling to advance candidates, or they retreat into the data to take more time to be certain about what they're passing on to the hiring manager. If the data set has holes, anyone on the hiring team lacks competitive insight. And I know I've gone on for a bit about this with the example of the recruitment manager, but Pierre, I want to ask you about your philosophy about career development versus candidate matching. What I'm talking about here is plugging data gaps to more strategically invest in long-term employment based on a solid employee-to-company match. What are your thoughts on this?
Thanks, Zach. One of the ways that we resolve this kind of problem within the industry is actually to allow employees to engage more with the solution, engage more with what you're offering them in terms of technology. So that way you can go get that visibility, that insight, the data that you need to drive your decision making in terms of who you're going to go get internally to fill in roles, and whether or not you need to go outside to get talent, and what sort of talent you need from the outside based on the information that you have about the roles that you have inside your organization. One of the ways that you can actually drive data into your system and also to improve the talent that exists within your organization is to foster a learning culture within your organization. Top talent love to learn new things, and they love to be recognized for what they're learning. If you create an open catalog that employees can access to find the kinds of training that match up with their advancement goals, and create training suggestions around specific roles and specific competencies that you want to improve within your organization, you empower employees to improve their knowledge and managers to see exactly what kind of talent exists within the organization. Their engagement with the training that you offer is also is a great way of gaining insight and visibility into your workforce. What competencies are out there? Trends in terms of specializations, what your employees are specializing in, and where you can place them within your succession planning, and the sort of training that they're engaging in. This is just one way that top companies have of improving the employee experience, gaining insight into their workforce, and allowing hiring managers and people who are in the recruitment side of your business to identify the right talent for the right opportunities, allowing managers like the one that Zach was talking about, transitioning from Europe to Canada, to have better insights and make better decisions about the kinds of candidates that they're proposing to the hiring managers.
Absolutely, Pierre. And I'm glad that you brought up the learning and development component, because I love analytical learning management that uses engagement data like digital shopping preferences to drive employees to the right development tracks that map their preferences to what managers need to see from them in terms of skills development. I know I keep harping on this, but stop and ask yourself how doing this is possible if your data sets have holes in terms of understanding those early employee preferences. Talent acquisition is where we get our first insights about candidates, but so many companies in the EU and Canada miss out on the best decisions or the best talent because their data simply can't show them the potential for either an external hire or an internal promotion or bonus opportunity. The performance profile is siloed from the talent brand, and that silo is deafening. In the EU, best-in-class companies are 36% more likely than all others to find that their HR data is not well integrated across HR functions. This doesn't necessarily mean that they're worse off because of it, but they're more likely to recognize it as they're looking at where their problems are. I just talked about a failing recruiter based on data gaps, but what happens when you have all the data but you can't piece it together to hear what it's trying to tell you? A lack of data integrations means that you don't have an HR ecosystem that can tell you where your best talent or your best talent opportunities are. For the recruiter, the HR manager, or the divisional manager, this poses several problems. First, it means that your job role includes being a data analyst to manually correlate at least some of the disparate data sets to hear what the data is saying. These manual assessments take time, and none of us can afford to take that time in this battle for shrinking pools of top talent. Our world is stuck now because the world of education isn't aligned with what our companies need, and this automatically shrinks talent pools and limits market development. For our relationships with our bosses, this means that the pressure is on to deliver good candidates more now than ever before. If we waste time on manual data processes, we lose out on top talent and we alienate good people before we even realize that they're the people for us. The second pitfall of manual analysis is that when there are holes or when the hiring team can't rise to the role of data analyst, they take that chance to make an instinctive decision based on their own biases just to save time. Do we really want to be taking that risk? Pierre, I can tell that you want to jump in here, but just before that, in Canada, 27% of firms lack data integrations and suffer these same challenges. When I broke down the Canadian data by industry, the impact of this rises as high as impacting 36% of companies, with education, government, nonprofit, and retail and hospitality feeling the impact the strongest. It's the same problem. Managers face a lack of immediate pressure to get the right talent in place quickly. For the top industries impacted, they take the time to hire right based on a full data set. Where industries like healthcare feel the pressure is that a lack of fast, good hiring is the difference between life and death. But as many of us who have been in a hospital may know, fast hiring with incomplete data analysis isn't delivering the best talent quality. In the end, fast sacrifices quality, and quality is sacrificing speed. EU and Canadian firms are making a choice they don't need to make. Do I hire fast or do I hire smart? First, hiring can happen from outside or inside the company. Companies are almost 2 times more likely than not to think that talent acquisition just happens when we bring employees in from outside the organization. If we're really focusing on hiring candidates for careers beyond jobs, hiring includes internal promotion. Put your internal employees up for open roles that better suit them to keep optimizing their contributions. Second, invest in the resources to complete your data sets and integrate them to build a talent placement framework that doesn't require an HR and hiring teams to be data analysts. Remove that burden to keep them in the moment with the smartest insights you can provide. And I hope I didn't beat you any severe punchlines on this, Pierre, but I really, really wanted to drill it home. And I mean, tell me if I'm right on this, especially about the data integrations.
Absolutely, and the seamless communication that you're talking about is enhanced by having a solution that's integrated. So that way, what's going on in your performance assessment is being reflected in your training directly, and it's being reflected as well in your succession planning. And bringing all that data together into one analysis, one dashboard, allows managers to make better decisions about what they're going to do in terms of their own employees and how they can plan advancement for their employees and their advancements as well. So what we're looking at is the possibility of creating bridges between disparate data sets to create decision making that drives better performance. And from an employee perspective, if there's silos in between different data sets for managers, it means that from the employee perspective, the employee is also experiencing this because they're doing a performance management review and it's not really connected to the training they've done, or it's not really connected to what the future of their career is. And again, this returns to engagement. Having a performance review process that's connected with the training that employees need to do to advance their career and a really good impression of what it is that they need to do to move forward in their career is key to getting them to engage with your platform, which also leads them to put more data into the platform, which you can then use to make better decisions in terms of hiring internally or externally. Creating the drive to stay within the organization through training and through the succession planning is giving employees the chance to continue to work for you. And if something happens that they do leave your organization, they're going to leave the organization with good things to say about your organization. So bridging the different components of talent management together in one solution drives both employee engagement and data into your decision-making process.
Thanks, Pierre, for that summary. It really kind of tied all those loose ends together about the need for building a seamless solution, a unified solution, and something that allows the data to intrinsically speak as one unified set all on its own. I admit that while I like talking about the data side, I'm hardly an advocate for necessarily replacing trust and interpersonal relationships with data-driven decisions. Instead, the data needs to be supporting the construction of those relationships over the long term. So let's plug holes in the data sets and bring all the data together so we can spend more time with the people and less time in the back office. But what's the worst thing that happens when we start working together again? Bias. It's not enough to bring the data together. We need to better define how the data will be used. 55% of EU companies today are stuck behind traditional and periodic performance reviews that revolve around cyclical metric analyses that are tied to business performance but not individualized performance. These checks make employees feel like they're being measured against a standard that isn't their own. They're also reactive in timing and abrasive in delivery while lacking any strategic data roots. Periodic reviews are really just timed feedback, but all employees know that they need to have a defense for whatever they imagine a manager might throw at them. The reviews also risk happening after problems have festered, so even if they respond to problems in a positive way, it may be too late to fix the situation. Traditional timed reviews are abrasive, subjective, adversarial, and unproductive. The average employee goes in defensive mode against perceived manager bias, and the manager is only allowed to praise when the company budget allows it and is all too eager to punish to improve fiscal productivity. When we look at the Canadian experience with the same issue, the results really aren't that different from the EU experience, and this makes sense because the traditional review is really in violation of how we want to interact with each other. No one wants to live in fear of the axe coming down on their lives, and for many people, job security is tied to their ability to relax and be happy. In Canada, 49% of companies find traditional performance reviews to be unproductive toward their long-term goals. These reviews just don't bring forward the kinds of insights managers need to move their departments forward, and they don't enable hiring teams to source good talent from within the organization that can contribute more in a more engaging role. And before I go on and on about this and keep harping on the negatives of traditional performance reviews, Pierre, I really just want to know that this is a really important concept for HR teams to understand, and I want your input on this.
Of course. So the subjective review, the continuous review is, as I mentioned before, something that a lot of top-performing companies are breaking out of because the level of engagement of their employees is incredibly improved when they're giving their employees an opportunity to act proactively to improve their careers and their contributions to the team and their company. So as Zach mentioned, it's really hard to break out of that sort of adversarial model if you're doing a backwards-looking sort of ruminating review. The continuous subjective review allows employees to have a straight line of sight on the value they're contributing to the organization and to appreciate that their managers in the organization is receptive to their contributions that they can continue to make within the organization. So basically, we're doing reviews all the time with our employees to allow them to see the contribution that they're making to the company and immediately address anything that's going on within their work, within the team, to see how we can improve performance. It allows managers and employees to focus on the future rather than ruminating about the past. Communicating goals are a great way for top employers to remain engaged with the company mission and for you and your managers to be transparent about what's going on through cascading goals, for instance. Continuous improvement is also a great way to remain aware of the state of your teams. What's the talent? Who has the talent? Where are they going? How are they feeling about their current position? What are they achieving? Are all powerful questions to ask and great ways for you to upload useful information into your decision-making process. HR is a real business partner in top-performing companies, and the data is central to the way in which that partnership can happen between the HR and the general goals of the organization.
And thank you for that, Pierre. That's a really great summation from the industry side about the negative impact of traditional reviews and any time for that matter that you put a wedge between management and the employees that they're managing. It just sets up for bad business. So switching back to the persona of our recruiter and wearing that hat for the moment, it turns out that as that recruiter, I've had success as the recruiter because I've learned from my bad experience in the EU. Now I'm the manager and I want to take a long-term view on labor viability at my company. I put in place a strategic integration between performance management and talent acquisition, just as Pierre spoke about, because I realize that talent placement needs to be as organic as the problems my company is trying to solve. I need to pull resources from wherever their top potential emerges. So I spoke to my former colleagues in Europe and they referenced a haunting statistic. Best-in-class companies are 16% more likely than all others to have trouble actively forecasting career opportunities from advertised roles based on the combination of talent and performance data sets. 16% right at the get-go might not be a big differentiating statistic between best-in-class companies and the rest of the market, but the risk is high that my company won't be able to build a good performance profile that helps build a good talent brand in a way that my new team can talk to incoming candidates like we want them to join us for more than just the job we know they can do today. I'm now in Canada. I'm competing with U.S. firms for top talent. And one of the big sells for Canada is that fewer firms means that career development should be a bigger focus at each company. If I can't live this, then I'm in trouble. That talent will leave me for the broader market once they go nowhere beyond their initial job. Something else came out in that conversation with my old office. 34% of EU companies admit that they fail to account for all the skill sets they define as necessary for a role. Stopping to think about this for a moment, my best talent may be inside my organization. How can I know this if I'm not constantly defining what top performance means to my company? Whether intuitive or data-based, I need to know how the organization is performing before I know how any incoming employees or transfers will fit in. You know what the real problem is? It's that their performance management system and talent acquisition systems aren't linked. It's impossible to build a profile for the positions that the manager requisitions because I don't really know what the company needs. I'm sitting at my desk in the Canadian office wondering about this problem for a minute before it dawns on me to check how our systems are managed. And wouldn't you know it, my office is in the 24% of Canadian firms that can't make this strategic link. It's time to do some career forecasting and performance-driven promotion and skills development. I need to get my company smart about its data planning and strategy because we really can do better. So stepping out of the recruiting manager's position for a moment, I'm now back as an analyst, and let's talk about the pressures we've talked about today. First, firms have holes in their talent and performance data sets, and those data sets, whole or hold, are not united into one talent placement ecosystem. Without centralized data analysis, HR loses out on some very serious and relevant insights toward understanding their workforce ROI. Two, when the data sets don't line up, HR recruiters, hiring teams, they all become data analysts, but none of them are trained for that. Truth be told, I don't think any of them want to be that. Manual data analysis is time-consuming, it's not fun, and it's isolating. And when you need to manually bridge data sets, it gets even worse. Manual analysis also forces management teams to choose between making timely decisions or making good decisions that are backed by data. With the right amount of solution unity, this isn't a choice we need to make, and it's not one we really should be making anymore. Three, if we don't solve the data holes or build analytical solution unity through agile analytics, we can't get to real-time and complete insights about the workforce. Data definition helps reduce risk in decision-making by providing a broader context on what's happening in your workforce and in the matchup between your company and the incoming workforce. Fast data analysis that brings the whole company together before your eyes means you can realize things faster and with more certainty. And before I go on to wrap up the pressure section, Pierre, I know you're itching to have some insights here, so I want to know what they are.
Actually, what you've said is great, Zach. And just to reinforce basically the idea, what's connecting all three of these things is really, once again, engagement. So using all the data that you've collected through the engagement that you have with your employees allows you to make great decisions driven by that data and making precise decisions about who it is that you want to fill the roles that you have internally, what talent is required for those employees going forward, and really having a good understanding of the competencies and the requirements of each role within your organization, because everything is speaking to one another, from recruitment through onboarding, training, process improvement, or engagement with your employees in terms of performance reviews, as well as the succession planning that you're doing to place people into the right roles.
Thanks, Pierre. That's really great connecting it to the process side and, again, back to some of the solution space, because in the long run, we're talking about talent placement and putting managers and employees on the same side of the table to resolve problems and build retention through careers and talent branding. We're really talking about goals and humanity. So the recruitment manager story isn't unique. So many companies face these challenges, whether they're in the EU, Canada, or both. In each environment, companies are facing challenges for different reasons, but the resolutions are more or less the same for both markets. In the case of our recruiter gone recruitment manager, the fact that the company operated in two markets gave them the opportunity to realize what the challenges were and identify a solution. The central challenge is a lack of strong talent placement to chart a long-term and progressive growth program for the company. The solution is to enable career placement and development through a technology-partnered solution centered on 5 main areas of HR and talent placement. When I think of a recruitment manager, I think about his understanding of how to chart a career for a candidate. Before beginning, he needed to think about why candidates may want to join the company. In the EU, the top priority for candidates is that they feel relevant to the organization's mission and vision. In Canada, he faces competition from U.S. industries who do things differently and who are under different regulations. In the EU, his company is inheriting new talent options because the EU provides mobility to where the jobs are. He's facing large applicant pools but smaller numbers of candidates who meet the criteria for the specialized talent needed to fill his open jobs. To a recruitment manager, I would say to focus on relevance. Build a rapport with the candidate that this is a good place to work and a good match where a career is possible. As it turns out in the EU market, employees want career tracks, and what better ones than those with firms that make them feel welcome. A recruitment manager is tasked with hiring long-term employees seeking good growth and with a will to develop their skills and talents. If you want ROI, match those characteristics. Development is a mutual goal between the employee and the manager. Personally, if a company is going to expect or demand development, I want that company to be a partner in that through their programming, through their incentives, and through their goals that should align with mine if they get the relevance factor right. It turns out that a lot of EU employees agree with me, and beyond that, they want to know where the boundaries are on different roles so they know how to rise to achieve inside the organization. The opportunities for growth can't be superficial, though. A recruitment manager knows that his company needs the tools to analyze what skills they're missing for different roles and what employee goals match to what career tracks motivate employees to participate in the growth of the organization. His initial challenges get in the way of being a partner in the hiring process for the candidates he wants to promote, and that needs to be fixed. The last piece for success in the EU is to build onboarding with strong social engagement. It sounds separate, but this is the link between talent acquisition and talent management going in that direction, where analytics is the link going in the other direction. Employees in the EU want the engagement they have with their recruiter to carry into engagement with their soon-to-be manager. Onboarding is where this happens, and it needs to be personal so new hires don't disengage because the company is reteaching things they already know or is treating them like just another hire. If our hiring manager is going to make promises and build engagement, he needs to mean it. Our recruiting manager has spent the time to understand why his former office is missing the mark on talent aside from his performance before he left. He chose timely decisions over quality candidates, and he got transferred to the Canadian office. His colleagues are choosing quality over timely decisions, and the EU office is not getting the talent they need because they're waiting too long, so goals change, productivity goals change, and promises can't be kept. The employees in the EU expect growth opportunities and that their employer will partner with them on their journey of growth and development. They want engagement to be personal and continuous, and they want it to be clear how to grow and develop. In terms of tools, they also know that they'll be measured, but they don't want it to be impersonal. Employer investment in employee development is important, and unifying talent solutions into a talent placement ecosystem is the key to getting there. Pierre, I have to believe that since we've talked about solution unity, since we've talked about training and development, that you're seeing a similar story out in the field to what our data is telling us on this with respect to the EU market.
Thanks, Zach. So what we're looking at here in terms of the different challenges that are being faced in the market in the EU are being faced as well, I find, in North America. There's similar challenges. They might have different headlines, but what we're really looking at, for instance, in terms of one area in which employers are performing very well and the way in which they're communicating their mission, vision, and goals to their employees. And in the way that we mentioned off the top, basically this idea of breaking down the annual review into a subjective continuous review allows employers to be transparent and honest about what's going on within the organization. Another way of doing this is by building training campaigns. So another way of communicating the vision and mission of an organization is to make some training around those points. So for instance, if your organization is trying to improve the wellness, well-being of the workforce, using a learning management tool is a great way of doing that. You use the learning management tool to create some activities, and you create some notifications around that, some activities, let's say, for instance, like yoga or lunchtime dance classes, which is something that we do at CIGID, at PERC, something that encourages movement and really allows CIGID to communicate the importance of well-being at work. Another campaign that you might be working on in terms of the vision or mission of your organization is to do a diversity and inclusion program, which you can also launch through your learning management system and track through your learning management system. Another thing that top performing companies are doing is making it easier to do things like rewarding in terms of growth and salary or bonuses, et cetera. Using an integrated solution allows you to really tie performance to the kind of remuneration rewards that you're doing in your annual campaigns with pay increases, really tying what it is that the contribution that you've made to the company to the sort of salary increase that you'll be receiving at the end of the year. Finally, the other way of doing this is through really rewarding and recognizing great work through gamification. An integrated solution allows you to give employees the impression that they're standing out among their peers based on the kinds of expertise they're able to provide to expert groups within a solution like ours, in which basically often millennials, will engage in these groups. They're like Facebook groups, and people ask questions and then they can respond. And based on the kind of response they get, they can get trophies based on the kind of contribution they're making, how often they're contributing to these different expert groups. So really a way for people to shine and to be recognized for that kind of engagement. In essence here, we've all seen the kind of self-starter, the great performer that everyone likes around the office. Rewarding that great talent is really important, and recognizing that talent is really important. Here at Cegid, we call that kind of talent unicorns. We did a great webinar around this with Brandon Hall a few weeks ago. The idea is that these are great assets for your organizations. Giving them the opportunity to learn and develop is key to ensuring that their contribution continues to be top shelf and that it continues to contribute within your organization. Unicorns will find out their gaps and proactively seek training. And helping them along through coaching and offering internal training opportunities is a great way of showing that your company is a great place for their advancement within their career, while allowing you to get great information, great talent, great data about your top talent, your top performers, what they're doing within their roles, the kind of training that they're looking for, et cetera, which allows you to make decisions with insight based on that data that you're getting from those great employees.
Thanks, Pierre. These are all really great points about building continuity of the employee story beyond just bringing people into the company at the time and place that you need them. Their experiences need to be strong, good, and engaging, and if they're not, then they'll spread the wrong messages about what your company offers to prospective talent. Thinking about a recruitment manager, he was able to see the shortcomings in his old office in the EU, but just like the pressures he saw earlier, he took a look at what was going on in his new office. To better understand things, he analyzed what the difference was between his industry and others to see how consistent his market is. In education, he found that candidates were looking for training resources provided by the institution, opportunities for financial assistance with skills development that the institution requires, and options for long-term career development. In government agencies, he found that candidates were desperate to break the corporate hierarchy so they could chart their own career development, but that they were partial to some division between job descriptions so they could understand what it takes to grow their careers. The mission and vision of the agency is also important to these candidates who are very driven behind what they do. In healthcare, candidates want to build a career track, but they also want their institutions to help them maintain their skills and certifications in cost and training resources, because the cost of certifications can get kind of expensive. In retail and hospitality, candidates value the company's mission and vision, looking for long-term opportunities to grow and develop, and seek some commitment from the company where they work. In IT services, candidates want a chance to grow more incrementally through rewards and recognition options. They also look for more defined career tracks or performance-based incentives to stay relevant in their industry and develop communal best practices. And then finally, in manufacturing, candidates want employers to provide on-the-job training that facilitates salary growth, even if titles don't change. Relevance to the organization is paramount, but long-term growth is important to get that relevance down. For a recruitment manager, it turns out that the central reasons employees want to join their organizations don't get blocked by geography or industry. He's seen that organizational relevance is built by facilitating relationships between the hiring team and candidates that progresses to relationships between new hires and their managers. He's also recognized that studying performance among existing talent feeds the talent brand for what it's like to work at the company and what the hiring team is looking for in new talent. Relationships facilitate relevance, and relevance feeds growth. If the company wants to be part of that growth and retain the candidate as a possible internal new hire down the line, the company needs to meet the candidate and employee part way on the cost and resources needed for growth and training. That means salary growth, title growth, and resource provisions to show that the company sees the potential in that person. For a recruitment manager, what does this mean in terms of technology? There are 5 core competencies of HCM that make up a unified talent placement ecosystem that supports this kind of candidate-company relationship and later employee-company relationship. A unified talent placement ecosystem consists of recruitment and talent acquisition, compliance and data management, performance management, and learning management centered on a unified analytics engine that ties the data contributed from the other 4 solutions together. Bringing these solutions together eliminates traditional HR data silos and presents a singular context-based data view for HR managers alike to understand where their emergent pressures are coming from and how best to resolve them within the resource sets that they have or need. Talent placement, as opposed to talent acquisition and subsequent performance management, siloed from each other, takes stock of the full employment environment inside the organization. Performance data lets managers to inventory skills on hand with respect to organizational and market changes, letting them plan for the skills they'll need. Interfacing this with talent acquisition data, job profiling, and learning and development lets them further plan for the future in the context of what their workforce is seeking today. Breaking this down, recruitment and talent acquisition focuses on getting the right talent to the right place at the right time. To make this happen, managers and HR rely on internal performance profiles derived by tracking and managing internal productivity while managing employee goals and stress managing indicators to understand what drives or hinders employee performance. Internal talent acquisition is facilitated by merging employee goals with those of the organization to build defined and driven learning tracks within formal and informal learning management capabilities. Underlying all of this are HR analytics that allow each component to talk to and feed each other, backed by strict data compliance to ensure that employee data is not breached, compromised, lost, or accessed without the employee's consent. Organizations that are unifying behind one data source of truth for talent placement are achieving success in terms of their employment metrics. Leaving the recruitment manager to come back to the data, from a strategic point of view, European companies are managing existing talent while focusing on measures to path a career forward as a top priority to build out the career potential of their workforce. These companies are also working to optimize career pathing by working with the employees themselves to align their goals with those of the organization towards a mutually recognized goal between both of them. For EU companies, an adaptive labor resource strategy simply can't be facilitated without a strong data record or a uniform analytics engine. Their goal is really to lead with an analytics-based solution and a compliance-based strategy. In Canada, the top priority is, again, to get the right talent to the right position at the right time. The right matchup depends on multiple characteristics beyond just skill sets, meaning that employers need to access more contextual information in talent placement decisions. An analytical profile that correlates external market drivers with respect to business goals to internal performance metrics helps organizations to define job descriptions and identify the best sources for their talent. The only key difference here is that Canadian firms are leading with an analytics-based solution like their EU counterparts, but they're focused on an engagement-based strategy. The metrics resulting from these strategies are very, very encouraging. For EU companies, turning to unified talent placement built on one solution is a best-in-class strategy. As the best-in-class continue to develop this goal, they're 24% more likely to find that their competitive position in their market is improved, 81% more likely than all others to find that the quality of HR and talent management protocols has improved significantly, and they're 73% likely to find that they're more effective at filling their hiring needs, and 70% likely to find that employee tenure has improved significantly. Among Canadian firms, 44% have found that their competitive position has improved, 67% have found their quality of HR and talent management protocols are significantly better, 76% find that they're more effective when it comes to talent acquisition, and 47% find that new hires meet or exceed expectations very quickly. A unified talent placement strategy that focuses on getting the right talent to the right place at the right time should be a dream for all of us. And it should all be based on back-end analytics that contextualize talent acquisition, performance, and development in a way that improves the advantages that all of our organizations have in their respective markets in the EU and Canada. And Pierre, I'd like to hand things over to you now to see if we can really bring this home, because the message here is so powerful that talent placement problems know no borders and know no industry lines. We followed a recruitment manager that's gone from the EU to Canada and run a real analysis, not just on his industry, but also on the industries he could pull from for talent. He realized that the market is troubled, but that if he unified his talent placement solution ecosystem using agile analytics, he could overcome the major pressures facing his company. From the metrics, that strategy is working regardless of the motivators that are driving his company in different locations to use it. And so, Pierre, now I really want to bring this home and what your thoughts are as a solution practitioner. How is this value option being really met in the field?
Thanks, Zach. And thanks for the introduction or the more in-depth look at the data that we're able to collect from top companies. As you mentioned before, for your top talent, getting the message across is about engagement. You need the right tools to communicate the values of the organization, track and reward contributions, and setting relevant, realistic, and rewarding training and development initiatives. As we saw, your success on these points will define your success in hiring and retaining talented individuals, as you will need to communicate these values through your employer brand, starting well before the hire, then even through your former employees. So basically, what we're looking at is the use of the tools that you have at your disposition with a unified platform to drive performance, to make decisions with insight, and to leverage the data that you're able to have to create a better situation in terms of the use that you're making of your internal talent, starting from even well before someone starts within your organization. A unified talent management tool allows you to have a communication that happens between each of the different modules and allows you to go and get the data that you're getting from your employees and transforming that data into insights. As we see here, we have a view of what the CIGID Talent Management Suite has to offer, essentially everything from recruitment through training, performance, talent management, compensation management, and succession planning. All that is surrounded by communication tools that allow you to really engage with your employees, communication that's either through email, directly through the platform, or even through text messages. These are ways that top employers are engaging with their employees to get the sort of data that they need to drive performance through insight. Our solution is natively developed, so all of the different modules that exist within the solution speak to each other naturally, and all the data that comes out of our solution can be tied to all sorts of different processes within the employee lifecycle. It's millennial friendly, and it's really a mobile-first design that's designed around the user experience, because the engagement that you're going to get from your employees is going to be improved by the experience that they have using your platform. It's an easy-to-use platform. They will engage more, they will learn more, and you will learn more about them because of the engagement they have with the solution. Top-performing companies today rely on integrated solutions to drive their performance because they're solutions that allow them to engage with their employees, get important data, and react to that data in real time based on the needs and requirements of their managers, the initiatives that are coming up, and changes within the market. Thank you again, Zach, and everyone for listening to this information. I'd like to hand it over now to Bennett for some closing remarks.
That concludes our webinar session. I want to take a moment to thank Zach and Pierre for sharing their research, insights, and recommendations with us, and thank you to CIGID for making this webinar possible. We hope you found this webinar to be beneficial, and if you'd like to learn more about cultivating top talent, you can reach out via the contact information currently up on the screen or visit the links for more information. Once again, thank you for watching our webinar, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.